Hello and welcome to my first impressions video of the Spectral Suite in Bitwig. So first, you may have noticed that all of my videos so far have been using hardware synthesizers, and you may have assumed that I only use hardware synths, but that's not true. I also use software, but I use some specific software. Moreover, for about the past 25 years, I've exclusively used Linux as a desktop operating system. Now, back 25 years ago, it really wasn't very appropriate for that, but I went for it anyway. Over time, it's become more and more capable. I originally used Ardor as my digital audio workstation, and it worked reasonably well. But then a beta version of Reaper was released, which included a number of nice features, including a nice sort of auto-tune suite and a number of built-in plugins. So I bought Reaper. I used that for some time, but what I felt like I was missing was a good performance-oriented setup, specifically something like the session view in Ableton Live. What I ended up moving to was Bitwig. Now, Bitwig was made by some engineers who previously worked on Ableton Live, but they had some slight philosophical disagreements. Moreover, they wanted to see the ability to route everything everywhere and to modulate anything freely, and that was implemented in Bitwig, and that's manifest most obviously in an environment called the grid, which I think is a really excellent software modular synth environment. My upgrade plan had expired, and I'd been thinking about upgrading for a while. The version I had was 4.2, and it had only just been released when my upgrade expired, so I'd been thinking about it. Then 4.3.9 was released. 4.3.9 came along with a set of paid-for add-ons called the Spectral Suite. I'll explain what they are, but it turns out there's been quite a lot of controversy over this because people have felt that having paid for the upgrade plan, everything should be included. I'm not really going to comment on that at all, but I'm going to say that when upgrading, it only cost me $30 to add the Spectral Suite. So I did. So I've paid for the Spectral Suite and I've paid for the most recent upgrade. Let's introduce what the Spectral Suite is. It's a set of 4 plugins which first transform your audio into the spectral domain. Now, if you're not familiar with what that means, a spectral representation of sound, instead of representing a waveform like the pressure wave in the air, it represents the amount of energy at a range of frequencies. Transforming between the waveform and the spectral domain is usually what's called a Fourier transform. A Fourier transform is a mathematical operation that does this transform with its inverse, the inverse Fourier transform. But there is a specific implementation often used in software called a fast Fourier transform. A true Fourier transform works on continuous data, which a sample is not. So the limitation of a fast Fourier transform is that given n samples, you get n over 2 frequency bands. So what this effectively means is you trade off frequency accuracy against time accuracy. You can imagine that this would be not very convenient, or it doesn't sound it, but there is a method used in audio compression such as MP3s called windowing. There are a set of windowing functions that allow you to take a large stretch of the waveform, calculate via some weighting mechanism frequency bands corresponding to some portion of that wave, and then when regenerating you use overlapping windows where the transform is done. So what does the Spectral Suite do? The Spectral Suite transforms your audio into a spectral representation. I don't know how many bands, but let's say it's maybe 512. It's usually powers of 2. Then it provides a set of algorithms to break those frequency bands and their relative volumes out into different groups. And they can then be, or they are then converted back to audio where they can be processed independently. And there are several algorithms that can be used corresponding to the 4 different effects. These are dividing by loudness. These are dividing by identifying the fundamental pitch of a monophonic sound and its odd and even harmonics, by identifying transients in the sounds, or breaking into a series of frequency buckets. So this all sounds quite abstract, but I'd like to demonstrate how this actually works in practice, and I'd like to show you what I've experienced with it so far. Now, I call this a first impression because I've only played around with this for a few minutes, but I found that it took quite a long time to go through and get everything set up the way that I wanted to. So I've done a little bit of pre-work here. I've played myself in a little loop of a piano sound, a lead sound, and some very basic percussion, and then I've also grouped them. Notice that these effects that you're seeing here are the Spectral Suite. They are the frequency split, which breaks into frequency buckets, the loudness split, which breaks into loud and quiet, the harmonic split, which identifies the fundamental, and the transient split, which processes the transient sound from the body of the sound independently. I'll play the loop and then we'll go through and enable each one of these plugins and see what exactly it allows us to do. Very simple loop. So the monophonic line is mostly there because I wanted something that the harmonic could track. What I'm going to then do first is I will mute the lead and the drums. So now we're only listening to the piano part. And I'm going to turn on the loudness split plugin. And you may have noticed a slight timbre shift. That is because now it is breaking into the spectral representation and then it's converting it back to audio, and this is not a completely lossless operation. But let's look at the UI first. Well, in this main window, we have the frequency bands represented by lines, and the higher the line, the louder the audio instantaneously is in that band. This plugin is designed to break the audio into the loud parts, the quiet parts, and everything in the middle. One thing that you can do then is you can disable the band, so that's effectively muting them. So now we can only hear the quiet band. Let me adjust the threshold. So that adjusts how loud a sound is before it's not considered to be quiet. The other controls I have here, this is the volume of the output here. And what I can do is I can show you, this is the input spectrum. If I click post, this is the output spectrum. So because I'm only listening to one band, this is all that's coming out. But if I unmute, you'll see the other bands coming in. And if I adjust the volume, you'll see the amplitude changing. So let's listen for now. A parameter here is the softness of the transition, or the knee. So what this means is, rather than having some hard cutoff where below a certain level it's always quiet and above that level it's loud, this allows some overlap between the bands. This can make it sound more or less natural. Other parameters are rise and fall. This represents how suddenly, when a frequency goes above the threshold, it is considered to move into the next band, and fall is how quickly it comes out. So you probably won't really hear much difference here on these. So you can hear we have some sort of background noise and some little transients going on. Let's listen to the loud part now. I think I'll pull this down a bit. So when I move the threshold down, more sound is considered loud. And now listen to the middle. So this part of the sound has neither the loud frequencies or the quiet frequencies. This is the post display, so this is the output. This is the input, which shows all of the frequency bands. So let's only listen to the loud now. So what can I do? Well, now I can process these independently. So let's say this loud band, what might I like to do? I might like to have a delay. So this delay is only applying to the loud parts of the signal. So I just put the threshold down so more things are considered loud. So let's listen only to the quiet. I like the thought that we could compress this. So let's go grab a compressor. So listen now when I only play back the high frequency part and the low frequency part. Sorry, the loud part and the quiet part. This middle band is absent. So what I might do now is mix some of the original signal back. So let me bring the effect in and out. This is the original. So I've used it fairly subtly. I didn't want to go overboard here, but I like what it's doing. So now let's switch to the lead part. So let's enable harmonic split. So you can see what's showing here is the point is indicating where the fundamental pitch is at any given moment. Then the orange parts represent one set of frequencies, and the cyan parts represent another. What I'm representing in these are the odd harmonics. Remember, 1 is an odd number, so the fundamental is an odd harmonic, and the even harmonics, and then everything else that isn't a multiple of that frequency, inharmonic. So those are the inharmonics. Only the even harmonics. Only the odd harmonics. We have other ways of breaking these down. So we have only the fundamental. Every third harmonic, every fifth harmonic, sixth harmonic, whole different range. So let me think about what I might like to do here. I quite like the sort of zappy texture that I get down here. So I might go for another delay. I'm tempted to add some compression as well. So, surprisingly, just listening to this inharmonic band is quite pleasant. Let's check out the other bands. So this is only the even harmonics. This is the odd. So I think I'd like to do something that's going to sort of blur this sound out. What's going to be nice? Let's have a quick look through here. Ah, okay, so I'm going to try blur to blur. But let's see what we got. So this is giving us a little bit more space. It's not very in your face, it's kind of subtle, but I quite like that. I think here, maybe we can go for a reverb. There's some nice convolutional reverbs available here, so let's go for maybe a spring. So let's try bringing this in and out. This room is a bit too much of a room. Turn the mix down there. Okay, I quite like that. So let's move on to the drums now. So this, the obvious choice being transient split. So the visualization is a little different here. The upper portion represents the volume or the energy in the transients, and the lower represents the volume or energy in the body of the sound. So let me just solo the transients. This adjusts how much gets detected as transient. So this means a lot gets considered transient. This means very little. So if I have too much as a transient, the rest of the tone is nothing. Okay, that's interesting. So what am I going to do with this? So I think I might try and put a chorus on the body of the sound. It's a modulation effect. Okay, sounds interesting. Let's listen to the transients. That's a pretty good job of separating these out. So I think a delay is an obvious choice. Let's try a ping pong. Okay, I like that. Let's try and adjust the mix. So this is dry. I guess I didn't actually adjust the mix on this, so let's listen. Okay, so let's bring all those parts in. And the final component here is going to be this group that I made, and I have the frequency split on here. So the parameters that we have for frequency splitting, let me turn the... In fact, I'm going to temporarily mute some of this. Hopefully you can hear me a little better with that muted. So the controls we have here are the audio gets placed, the frequencies get placed into buckets, and they are sequential bands, and the total number of bands get divided into a certain number of buckets. And then those buckets, even though we split it 16 times, there are only 4 output buckets. So every 4th bucket goes into 1. Start 1 after that, every 4th bucket goes into 2. So let's listen to this. Even just separating those out, I like how that sounds very much. I think it's very interesting. So we can already do something. Let's try with 8 bands. So we have another number of other parameters available to us here as well. We have this control here, which controls whether the bands are linearly distributed or non-linearly in various ways, and adjusts the distribution. So let me just drag it and you can see. You see how some of the bands get wider and some of them get narrower as we drag this across, and they get closer together or further apart. So this to me automatically looks like a good place to use some effects, some modulation. So let's just grab ourselves some LFOs, and let's use the first 2 LFOs to modulate there. Now the frequency is obviously way too fast at the moment, so let's bring this down. Let's go 0.8 Hertz, 0.9 Hertz. So let's listen to one of these bands. Actually, I think I liked how that sounded with 16. So we have a couple of other controls here. We have nudge, which is a way of offsetting in absolute terms the spectrum one way or another. And we have spin, which is a way of adding before the transformations are applied. So I think I'm going to do a little bit of both of these, just so we have all these frequencies dancing around. The frequencies are a bit high. Let's go 0.6. Oh, sorry, 0.06, 0.05. So this is now a fairly subtle motion. So one thing that we could do already is just pan these out in the spectrum a little bit, stereo spectrum. So let's try minus 30, minus 8, plus 8. plus 30. So that adds a little bit of width. Another parameter I noticed here is we can soften. I noticed you can see the blurring around there. We're softening the cutoff of these frequencies. So we're allowing blur just like we did in the other spectral plugins. So what might we like to do to adjust these? Oh, we also have this limiter. So I think what that's going to do is it's going to effectively hard cut frequencies at a certain band. So any frequency that goes above that volume, it just gets capped. So now to put some effects into here. So what sort of effects would we use? So given that these frequency bands are not really carefully chosen, one of the things I'm tempted to try is to put a whole load of convolution reverbs on, and each one can have a different space. There and there. So at the moment they all have the same space. Oops, I didn't mean to put that out there. So I have, yeah, here. So let's pick the reverbs. Real halls. Let's start with a relatively short one for this first band. For the second band, that was about 1.7 seconds. Let's go for one that's a little bit longer. Let's see. This one is 4 seconds. The next band, maybe something that's 5. There's 8 seconds. And then there's one that I saw that was even longer. 15 seconds. So let's listen to them individually. The next one. Okay, so let's bring the other parts back. So those reverbs are a bit over the top. I'm going to dial the mix back. Okay, so I think I've managed to achieve what I was looking for here, which is to have a little explore of these plugins. I definitely haven't really dug in very deep into what's actually possible to do, but I think I've illustrated a little bit of using them in a relatively subtle way. But I think you could imagine how these could be used much more extremely. And in fact, that more extreme use is what I'm interested in. Specifically, there's a project that I've been working on, and I'd say I've been a bit stalled on it, and it's partly because I've been looking for something else. And I think this Spectral Suite could be exactly the something else that I've been looking for. So anyway, I hope this has been informative. I hope you've been interested in seeing the Spectral Suite, but most importantly, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.